a successful and safe event, there are a few ground rules that we would like to establish. We do ask everyone to remain in their seats until the conclusion of the event. You will have the opportunity to ask questions during a Q&A session. There will be a line forming on this staircase over here, and you can meet Dr. Gustafson at the bottom of the stairs if you would like to ask a question at the conclusion of the speech. We do ask that there be no yelling, stomping, or any disruptive behavior during any time the speaker is speaking. And we ask that there be no use of profanities when addressing the audience or the speakers. Restrooms are located outside of the doors to your right down the hall, and make a left, and there'll be men and women's restrooms there for you. We just ask that you follow any and all direction given by any public safety officials or Douglas County sheriffs. Turning Point USA, in addition to event and security personnel, reserve the right to remove any person at any time for any reason. We are hoping that this is an educational opportunity for all parties involved, and anyone who partakes in any sort of behavior suggesting otherwise will be asked to leave. We also would like to take a moment to recognize a few that we have in attendance with us today. We have Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska. Of the United States military, either serving or previously, please stand. So once again, we would just like to thank everyone for coming. We're excited to bring together two very different perspectives and attempt to reach a place of understanding and encourage the civil discourse and open conversation that is so important to have, especially in a place of higher education. With that, I'm happy to introduce to you our moderator for the night. He will be introducing our speakers as well, Dr. Gustafson.
Welcome. Creighton as a Jesuit university is an excellent location to have a public discourse on the relationship between capitalism and Catholic social thought. The Jesuit tradition is that all ideas should be heard and truth should be accepted from wherever it comes. Jesuits have always been known for the exchange of ideas, the rigorous examination and challenge of those ideas, as well as charity. I believe tonight's exchange will exemplify those ideals of respect and rigor. With no further ado, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Colm Kelly and Mr. Charlie Kirk. As follows. Mr. Kirk is going to speak for 15 minutes, and then Dr. Kelly is going to speak for 15 minutes. Then we have 4 questions, which have been pre-chosen by the participants, and I'm going to ask those questions, and they'll each have 3 minutes to respond to those. And then in the final half hour, there'll be opportunity for you to ask questions as well. So for the first hour, you don't need to stand up and stand in line. Okay? With that, Mr. Kirk, please come forward.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here tonight. First, I want to say thank you to good doctor for having this conversation tonight about these issues and these topics. Kind of going right out of the gate, I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm not a Catholic, but I am going to be mentioning a lot about Catholic social teaching and the Catholic Church in general. So, as an evangelical Christian, I just want to say to all the Catholics in the audience, thank you for the Bible. Good start. Appreciate that. Without you guys, that wouldn't have been put together. So, really appreciate that. So, born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, I started this organization 6 years ago. That's now grown beyond my wildest dreams and our imagination. We're on 1,300 college and high school campuses now across the country, and our amazing leaders here at Creighton have done a wonderful job. The Ben Shapiro event was a huge success, and we have our chapter leaders here from UNL and UNO as well. So I'm a Christian, I'm a proud capitalist, and I am committed tonight to tell you why those things can be quite ideologically and philosophically consistent. I have a great amount of respect for the Catholic Church. In fact, I'm going to ask a question at the beginning of this, and I hope that you mull it over throughout my speech and my comments tonight. Who has done more good for the poor over the last 100 years? The Catholic Church or the U.S. government? Think about that. Just think about that, and I think we'll be able to come to some answers. So what I love most about the Catholic community is its focus on helping those that need help the most, the needy, the less fortunate, and those that have not been as blessed as others. What I find most striking about the Catholic Church is that no one is forcing individuals of that community to do it. It's people helping people. It's voluntary assistance. It's voluntary exchange of time and of treasure. Through the teachings of Jesus Christ, the Catholic Church, in my opinion, is a great example of exactly what we, as free society advocates, are trying to advance. It does not necessarily always have to be government to help other people. In fact, the best way to help other individuals, I would make an argument, is through charity, is through private philanthropy, is people stepping up and stepping out and helping the individual that needs that extra leg up, absent of government coercion. As a capitalist, I also look at results. Let's first define capitalism, just so we know. Capitalism, despite all the buzzwords and despite all the negative connotations associated with it, capitalism in its purest form is individuals pursuing their own self-interest, absent of restrictive government intervention or coercion. Now, by doing so, you have to create something of value in the marketplace. So if you're not able to do that, then you're not going to get rewarded. And we have seen over the last 100 years the incredible success and results of free enterprise capitalism. Life expectancy in the 1900 was 38 years. Now it's upwards of 77 years in the United States. The medical innovations, advancements, people are living better and longer than ever before, all thanks to a free enterprise system. In the 1995, the UN made a huge goal for the Global Bank to try to get global poverty below 18%. Well, it's now at 9.5%, totally smashed global expectations. And it's not because of redistributive government policies or welfare that's happening. It's because of neoliberal, free trade type policies that people's lives are getting better. And it's quite simple, because embedded in a capitalist system is the idea that in order for one to get wealthier or one to get rich, you have to trade value for value. So just because someone gets rich does not mean someone necessarily gets poor. In fact, products and goods and services will get simultaneously better as those goods and services are traded. And so, but let me walk you through a couple of questions here of why and how I came to these conclusions. So 5 really quick questions. Are people good by nature? So as a Christian, and most people here would agree, people are actually not good by nature. In fact, we're from the fall that we are described to us in Genesis, from that fall on, we are broken. The idea of original sin. And no matter how much we try to change that, human nature is broken. And a great example is you look at parents with their kids. We have to teach goodness to our children. We have to tell kids to stop crying. Very few parents will, if any parents, if I'm not mistaken, will teach their kids to lie, cheat, or steal, but they do it anyway. It's inherent in our nature. We have to teach goodness to our children. The next question is, are people perfectible through massive societal or governmental institutions? I would say absolutely not. They're not perfectible. In fact, no matter how much we try to change human nature or try to socially engineer human beings, we're going to fall short of that. So the third question I guess we should ask is, what is the best way to teach goodness and righteousness and virtuous character? Is it through government? Or is it through churches? Or is it through societal institutions? I would say it's absolutely through the church. It's through individuals and not through government, not through coercion. And here's the fourth question, is what is actually the best way to help people? Is the best way to help people to take from one group forcibly and coercively to give to another? Well, the results speak for themselves on that, and I'll touch that in a second. Or is it instead to have charities and have individuals that are properly incentivized to help the least of these continually go out and do that in the communities? So capitalism is about empowering people to make decisions that will, in essence, not only make their own life better, but have to make someone's life better with it. Because if you create something in a marketplace that does not work, if you create something in a marketplace that is not a good idea, no one is going to buy that product. Here's a great example. You go to Starbucks, you can walk, and it's a fun, silly example, but it still works. You go to Starbucks and you say, I'd like to have a venti skim no foam latte. Now you all know my Starbucks order. So, and all of a sudden they give it to you and you'll say thank you, and they'll say thank you back. Thank you, thank you. Wait, hold on a second. If someone's getting exploited in that transaction, someone should say, thank you, screw you. We're both winning because we're trading value for value. And the same happens when they deliver the beans in the morning. And they say, thank you, because they both think they're getting the better end of that deal. And in capitalism, large in part, of course there's outliers and there's exceptions. When individuals are allowed to freely interact and freely exchange, everybody wins. See, I'm the winner when I buy an iPhone, but Apple also thinks they're a winner. I say, I can't believe I have this for $600 and all the value I get out of that. And they say, I can't believe that guy bought that for $600. I mean, can you believe the markup on that? And because of that, we have seen the greatest standard of living increase in human history. And you contrast that with other countries and other sectors of the world that embraced more neo-Marxist ideas, that did not allow free trade, that tried to keep wealth creation down and tried to keep transactions limited. You continue to see widespread poverty, and you see suffering because of that. And you see in Southeast Asia, for example, the rapid standard of living increase that is unmistakable and inarguable is thanks to the opening of those markets and the possibility and the capacity to continue to trade freely in an open world. So I do want to make another distinction here, though, and kind of tie it back to the theme of, tie some theology into this, is that it's very important to think just because I want to help people, which I agree with as a Christian, we should help the least of these, it does not necessarily mean government should do it. It's a very important distinction. Coupled with, even if government should do it, is government good at doing it? So you look at, for example, Catholic schools. The price per pupil of educating a student through a Catholic school, K through 12, is about $6,800 a year on average across the country, about on average. A government-run school is about $22,000 per individual. I would say a Catholic school does a much better job of holistically bringing a young person through, not just through Scripture and not just through theology, but through character development, through a better worldview, through better understanding math and science than a government-run school ever possibly could. But you also look at the collection of Catholic charities. You look at Ascension Medical, which is a $1.8 billion a year charity, or the Catholic Charities of America, $3.3 billion a year. Based on all the evidence that I've seen, that they do much better job on a parcel of probably 100 times multiple of helping the community they're designed to go to assist than the government bureaucrats that are paid 9 through 5 to try to help those individuals. Now, why is that? Well, it's because those that are involved in the charities, through the Catholic community or the Protestant community, they are convicted for the right reasons to help those communities. America is the most generous country in the history of the world. America voluntarily gave away $500 billion last year to charity. So just to give you an idea, that's the GDP of most Eastern European countries combined. It is the most generous country in the history of the world. And in fact, if we continue to lower our tax rates, that would be $1 trillion. And I believe that is what makes America such a unique concept and something so admirable, is that when people are in assistance and people are in need, it is within our moral character and conduct to step up and help the least of these. And the results speak for themselves in that capacity. I know my time is running thin. You're keeping the time, right? How much do I have left?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes left, okay. I don't want to go over. I don't want to monopolize the time. Monopolies are bad, by the way. The best way to stop monopolies is competition. We'll talk about that later. So the last question I do want to ask is, what system has helped people get out of poverty the most? And for human history, we kind of saw this flatline plateau curve up until the late 1780s, early 1800s, when we saw the advancement and the opening of markets. Essentially, Adam Smith began to observe this in the inquiry into the cause of the wealth of nations, where Adam Smith was like, what makes certain countries richer? What makes people richer? That's actually the original title. It's not just wealth of nations. It's an inquiry into it. And what he found is that the restlessness and the entrepreneurial spirit to take risks is something that should continually be rewarded absent of government coercion and government force. Kind of tying this back to the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Bible, because I know this is a popular argument. Jesus, who is my personal Lord and Savior, and I'm guessing is the Lord and Savior of many people here in this audience, first and foremost instructed the individual to help individuals. He was very precise in the language and the text that we have through the Bible. about personal salvation, personal choices, and individuals helping individuals. Absent anything that I've been able to come, he did not call for the creation of a broad collective or welfare state. In fact, he resisted the state. Jesus Christ was one of the only figures in human history to rebel against the state at every sort of call to try to be in a position of political power. In fact, his disciples tried to encourage him and tried to ask him to take a position of political influence over the region. And he rejected that, which showed, I think, his unmistakable divinity and humility, because he had a higher purpose. He didn't run to try to have political influence. He came here to save the world. And what is the point of that? Is that before we try to go into the temptation that government should try to solve these issues or problems, we should look at what kind of culture, what kind of country is going to make individuals step up and do that the most. So you can look through Europe right now. As the size and scope of government of Europe has increased dramatically since the 1960s, you have seen church attendance go down dramatically. You have seen rates of people self-identifying as atheists go up. And you've seen private charity basically disappear throughout Europe. It's a concept that they don't understand at all. And so if we're looking for what kind of a economic system is going to allow the freedom and the capacity to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people, the obvious answer is one that allows that very freedom to exist. If you look at where Christians are most under attack today, whether it be in godless China or in atheist North Korea, it's where we have allowed the state to expand to incomprehensible size, all based on the merit of trying to help the most amount of people. And so, as we enter the latter part of the 21st century, this is going to be a discussion that happens more and more. And what has made Western civilization so unique, and one of the greatest experiments ever to happen since really in human history, is this belief in the individual. It's the belief that people helping people, not necessarily government having to coercively insert itself, is what makes this experiment so successful and so unique. So to kind of tie it all together, I look forward to a continued discussion on this issue. One of my favorite quotes of Scripture is 2 Corinthians 9:7, which Paul wrote, not to reluctantly or under compulsory give to others, but God loves a cheerful giver. And to me, that really shows that it's not about coercion, it's not being forced to help other people, but someone who is truly within the Christian walk of life is going to be convicted to help another person and is going to be compelled and commanded by the teaching of Jesus Christ to do so, absent of government forcing that upon other people. And if you look at where Christianity has succeeded the most, it is where free individuals and free people are able to use those decisions, use the capacity to make those decisions to help the most amount of people possible. So I look forward to this discussion, and thank you again for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So in the time I have with you, I would like to frame an understanding of economy and government from the perspective of Catholic social thought. After which I hope we can have a robust and respectful dialogue. The former Father General of the Society of Jesus, Father Peter Hans Kolbenbach, once said the following about how to determine the success of a Jesuit university. The real measure of our Jesuit universities lies in who our students become. What we see in this statement is an evaluation of a system, in this case our university, and whether it humanizes our students or not. There are many ways we could measure the success of Jesuit education. We could look at the average salary of our graduates, the average wealth of our alumni, the number of publications they create, the professional and technical jobs they attain, the power and position in society they claim. But we don't. We use a different standard, a standard that is holistic and integrated. Do our students become more fully human, intellectually, professionally, psychologically, morally, and spiritually? This education of the whole person, educated to accompany and serve others, is our measure of success. This is who we are. But where does our understanding of human come from? And how can I judge whether a person has measured up? Christianity claims that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. But what does that mean? The Catholic tradition argues that humans are creatures who are both sacred and social, and made for love. We are sacred because we are created in God's image and likeness. We are social because God is social, 3 persons in one Trinity. And we are created for love, to give love, receive love, and share love, because God is love. But the funny thing about love is that it always involves an other. It is never just about me. It can't be. It must always go beyond myself, however construed. So the human person under a Catholic and Jesuit understanding of person is oriented toward others positively. Not because we have to be, but because this is how we are made. This understanding of the human person has direct consequences for how we understand the economy and the role of government. I want to begin a consideration of the economy with a story. Back in 2008, I was having dinner with a couple who own and manage an architectural firm here in Omaha. We were discussing the crash of the stock market and what might be next. I mentioned to them that it must be difficult to have to fire employees because of the downturn in all things financial. I will never forget what they said to me. We are responsible for the well-being of 36 families, they said. Not employees, not units of production, not workers, not paid labor, but families. And they continued, we have decided to all take a pay cut instead of letting anyone go. I give this as an example of how we ought to view the economy. The economy is the servant of human beings, not its master. Our only master is God. Any complex system, whether it be an institution like a university or a set of systems like an economy, is determined by rules set down by someone, enforced by someone, and benefiting someone. I do not know a human system without rules that govern it. Thus, government should be as large as necessary and as small as possible in order to govern effectively. Sometimes we refer to an approach to the economy that implies it can be free or autonomous, an almost sentient being that ought to be left alone to just do its thing. I would argue that this understanding is factually incorrect, but does exist in libertarian thought. And in this regard, the Catholic Church agrees with me, or perhaps put better, I agree with the Catholic Church. In Catholic social thought about economic systems, one thing is always present. There is a condemnation of both Marxist collectivism and unregulated free market capitalism, always together. In 1931, Pope Pius XI stated, quote, "Just as the unity of human society cannot be founded on an opposition of classes," referring to Marxism, "so also the right ordering of economic life cannot be left to a free competition of forces. For from this source, as from a poisoned spring, have originated and spread all errors of individualist economic teaching." This means that neither system in itself helps people become more fully human in the way the Church wants. Marxist collectivism suppresses people's initiative and freedom over their lives in the name of the collective. Unregulated free market capitalism leaves human beings subject to market forces that can dehumanize in the name of productivity, profit, and consumption. Neither economic system has ever been viewed as the ideal according to Catholic social thought. This is not an opinion. It is clear in every social encyclical and magisterial document written by the Catholic Church. So if the Church doesn't endorse Marxist collectivism or unregulated free market capitalism, what does it endorse? The Church endorses a vision for the economy where human beings thrive in the same humanistic way I described with Jesuit education. The perspective of Catholic social thought is that the measure of our economy lies in who our people become. Do we foster human dignity and the common good, or not? And how can we measure that? We know that we want people who are healthy, happy, and generous to others, at least according to Catholic social thought. One way might be to compare the United States to the other countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Their mission is defined as the following. The OECD acts on behalf of and in collaboration with its member governments to promote free market policies and trade. so I'm clearly not suggesting a Marxist comparison. And yes, the U.S. is an OECD member. How does the U.S. compare to other countries on some important indicators? Fortunately, there are data sets that make those comparisons. In terms of how much the U.S. aids other countries in their development, we rank 25th of the 34 countries measured. That's the bottom 25% for generosity. What about education? In the 2015 PISA assessment, the United States ranked 19th in science, 20th in reading, and 31st in math out of 35 OECD countries. What about health systems? According to the World Health Organization ranking, the U.S. spends more than anyone else on health care, but is ranked 37th. Among high-income nations, we are ranked the worst. Welcoming of immigrants in recent years, as a percentage of our population, immigrants constitute roughly 0.3% of our population each year. We rank 18 out of 24 countries that provided data. Those over 66 years old who live in poverty, we rank 18 out of 26 countries. Poverty rate, 32nd out of 35. Children in poverty, 30 out of 35. Quality of life, 20 out of 29. We lead the developed world in gun violence. Number of prisoners, first in the world, more than China, Russia, and Iran, both in absolute numbers and as a percentage of our population. Economic inequality within our country, we are 23rd out of 30. Now, we are comparing market-based democracies to market-based democracies. Of the 193 countries in the world, we are the only high-income country without paid maternity or paternity leave for parents. The other two, if you're curious, are New Guinea and Suriname. We are the only developed country without universal health care. By almost every measure, the U.S. leads OECD countries in terms of income inequality, largely because America has the stingiest welfare state of any developed country. I would further add that all the countries ranked in front of us, relatively speaking, have a bigger government. Now, to some degree, these indicators show what I think are less than desirable outcomes for an economy and a government measured in terms of how well it serves human dignity and the common good. I would like new parents to have more time with their children. I would like the ability to care for our bodies and minds independent of how much money I make. I would prefer that fewer of my fellow citizens were poor. I'm less interested in GDP growth and more interested in how the GDP is distributed, and so is Catholic social thought. Paul VI said in 1967, individual initiative alone and the mere free play of competition could never assure successful development. One must avoid the risk of increasing still more the wealth of the rich and the dominion of the strong, while leaving the poor in their misery and adding to the servitude of the oppressed. The Catholic view is that markets are indeed human constructs and that they are not neutral. Pope John Paul II made this very clear when he spoke of the need for a proper juridical framework for the market to prevent too great an imbalance of power between market participants. So the Christian moral vision for the government and economics advocated by Catholic social thought is neither Marxist nor capitalist. Rather, it is a vision guided by core principles that measure any system that organizes economic life according to those principles. And the following are some of these principles used for measuring. The first is human dignity. Catholic social thought proclaims that all human life is sacred. Preborn, born, convicted felons, LGBTQI persons, poor children, undocumented immigrants, the elderly, those with disabilities, prisoners of war, enemy combatants, civilians in war zones, all human life is sacred. Not because we decide it is, but because God created it as such. Thus, the dignity of the human person is at the core of this moral vision for society. Second, the common good. In the Second Vatican Council, the common good is defined as, quote, the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. By common, we mean all people. To pursue the common good is to work towards the greatest good for all persons, not the greatest good for the greatest number, and certainly not the greatest good for only a specific group of people. We are all obligated to work for the common good. Third, rights and responsibilities. Because humans are social and have innate dignity, the Church insists on a God-given right to all those things necessary for the realization of human dignity. and these include food, housing, work, education, and access to culture, transportation, and basic health care. And that's a quote. And because humans are social, individual dignity is necessarily related to the common good. The church insists that individuals and institutions have a duty both to respect others' rights and build up the common good. Fourth, the role of government. Because we are sinful social beings with different, sometimes even conflicting philosophies, human society needs authority in the form of the state to establish rules that ensure human flourishing. The church insists that the state is natural to the person and has a positive moral function. It is an instrument to promote human dignity, protect human rights, and build the common good. Its purpose is to assist citizens in fulfilling their responsibility to others in society, from how fast you drive to whether you pay taxes. Fifth, justice. Far from being a merely one-on-one relationship, justice is always and also social. Distributive justice, as promoted by the church, requires that actions and institutions related to owning and using the goods of the earth ensure that the needs of everyone are met. General justice, sometimes referred to as legal or even social justice, refers to the obligation that every person has to contribute to society and to the obligation that societies have to enable all persons to contribute. Subsidiarity, number 6. This brings us to an important principle that applies to all of life: the church, business, government, any institution. In general, with respect to the state, subsidiarity means that issues should be addressed with the lowest possible but highest necessary level of government needed to protect and promote the common good. Seventh is solidarity. Catholic social teaching, thanks to St. John Paul II, has enshrined solidarity as a social virtue. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers, wherever they live. We are one human family, whatever our national, racial, ethnic, economic, or ideological differences. Solidarity means that we are all really responsible for all. 8, the option for the poor and vulnerable. One criterion for how we judge an economy is how well the most vulnerable members of our society are faring. The homeless, the immigrant, the various minority populations, the sick, those in prison, etc. This commitment comes from the fact that the poor are most vulnerable to violations of human dignity and to marginalization that prevents adequate economic participation. Thus, we are supposed to put the needs of the poor and vulnerable first when deciding upon public policy positions. 9th, care for our common home. There is an environmental challenge, attested to by the vast majority of scientists and acknowledged by the Catholic Church: the human effect on global climate change. This environmental reality has fundamental moral and ethical dimensions which cannot be ignored. Within all these principles is an understanding of a word loved by libertarians and conservatives: freedom. For the Catholic Church, however, freedom is not simply individual liberty that allows me or you to do whatever we want. This is a libertarian understanding of freedom that is antithetical to Catholic teaching. Rather, the Church insists that freedom is the capacity to do and become that for which we are created: sacred and social beings, invested with both rights and responsibilities, by love, for love, to love. So if I'm measured by my relationships to everyone, but I only take care of myself, or those close to me, or those like me, I have failed the Christian moral vision of solidarity introduced by John Paul II, which states we all really have a responsibility for all. Catholic social thought would say that a social order that denies someone the ability to fulfill their responsibilities, like staying home with their newborn, or not being able to pay for your child's health care, or finally working for 40 hours a week and not being able to pay for basic necessities, is frustrating human dignity and violating the common good. I'd like to close with a quote from Pope Francis in the document titled The Joy of the Gospel. Throughout his papacy, Pope Francis has criticized libertarian ideologies that promote radical versions of human freedom and rights. As a result, many conservatives dismiss him as radical or unorthodox. However, Francis has simply and clearly restated what Pope Benedict, St. John Paul II, and the long tradition of Catholic social thought all teach about economic life. Quote, "The lessons of the global financial crisis have not been assimilated, and we are learning all too slowly the lessons of environmental deterioration. Some circles maintain that current economics and technology will solve all environmental problems, and argue in popular and non-technical terms that the problems of global hunger and poverty will be resolved simply by market growth. They show no interest in more balanced levels of production, a better distribution of wealth, concern for the environment and the rights of future generations. Their behavior shows that for them, maximizing profits is enough. Yet by itself, the market cannot guarantee integral human development and social inclusion. The Catholic view of markets, as we have seen, requires that governments establish a juridical framework to structure markets for the common good. Thus, it is not a bad thing that governments have a strong role in defining markets, as long as they do so by prioritizing human dignity. Thank you.
Bring this over here. We got it.
Well, that was a good start, I think. We've got 4 questions. These questions were constructed by faculty here at Creighton, some chosen by Turning Point, some chosen by Dr. Kelly, and also some students. And then from those 12 questions that were assembled, the 2 participants got to choose 2 that they wanted. So we're going to start off with each time with whoever chose the question, give them 3 minutes to talk, and then the other person can have about 2 minutes to respond to that question. We'll go back and forth. The first question is one that Dr. Kelly chose. It's an interesting one. It's about the relationship between economic freedom and political freedom. So here's the question. Dr. Kelly, you can start. Many would argue that there cannot be political freedom without economic freedom. Can an economy organized on Catholic social principles preserve individual freedoms and human dignity? Or does Catholic social thought require a surrender of some economic freedoms? And if so, what are the consequences for political freedom? We only have one mic, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I was interested in this question because of the connection between political and economic freedom. I think we've seen examples, when I grew up, when I was growing up, we had the Soviet communist state, we had Cuba, more recently we have Venezuela, and it's pretty clear that without political freedom, there isn't economic freedom there. I don't know anybody who argues for sort of the Marxist communist approach to economics. But at the same time, when I think about those, I think about the various attempts of the United States, especially in Latin America, to impose a free market system. And the only way we could do that was to impose dictatorships. And I'm thinking specifically of Pinochet in Chile, or Somoza in Nicaragua, Batista in Cuba, thinking of the military junta in Guatemala in 1954, when after 10 years of their experiment with democracy, we decided that that government was too far to the left for us, and so the CIA, it's on video, the CIA admitted to overthrowing the government, and we put a military junta in power for 30 years that killed 300,000 of its own people. Now, they would have been called a free market economy, but they had no political rights. The same was true of El Salvador. Our government, it was more important for us to trade with the 14 families than it was to actually work for the development of the whole country. So they had a free market economy, but they had no political rights until the conclusion of the Civil War. So I guess there's a mixed view on this. On the other hand, I see places where there are fewer economic freedoms, if you will, higher tax rates in places in Europe, and yet they have political freedom. People vote in Belgium, they pay 50% taxes. You can go on and on about the different OECD countries that have bigger government but are perfectly healthy with political rights. So that's one of the reasons I chose that. There are, of course, failures on both sides. And I don't think that simply having a free market economy, some would argue that China is a free market economy, even though it has very few political rights. Some people call it a command economy, where the government decides what people are going to produce. But I don't think with a free market economy you automatically get political rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Again, the question is, how does political freedom go along with economic freedom?
I asked that.
You asked that.
So I challenge, I guess, comment on that it's very dangerous to start to just segment political freedom, economic freedom. You have to look at it more holistically as just freedom in general. And because when you start to compartmentalize that, see, for me personally, you make a fair point about the countries in the OECD and they still have freedom, but for me, I believe the capacity to earn at least more than 50% of what I earn is instrumental. It's critical. I mean, if the government's going to take 50% of my earnings, I'm not free. That is freedom. I mean, if the government is going to coercively take a majority of my income, they own me. They own 50+1 of my life. They own your time. They own your livelihood. They own, you wake up every single day, half your life is then the government's. That's not freedom. So I would make an argument that, sure, you could still vote, but then half of your livelihood is then succumb to the state. And so the perspective that we come from is how can we have the lowest amount of taxes possible to still pay for essential government services such as the military, schools, and so forth, but does government need to have this monolithic welfare state that, I think this is the next question that I'll comment on in a second, that's ineffective, it doesn't help the people it's supposed to help, and it takes our hard-earned earnings to a government bureaucracy. Most of the money never actually gets effectively or appropriately redistributed to communities that it's supposed to help. Meanwhile, we're the ones that are busting our tails to fund that. And so going back to kind of what I was making the argument is you look at the amount of money that we give to charity on the aggregate level, which is extraordinary, $500 billion a year. That's done voluntarily because they have to earn our money. The charities have to prove to the person giving the money that they're doing their job. There's not a gun put to their head. There's a reason that I voluntarily give my money to my local high school, or to my local baseball team, or to my local hospital. It's because I see the good work that they're doing. If the IRS and the government was doing such a great job, people in this room, you're more than willing to write a bigger check to the IRS every single year. No one's going to prevent you from doing that. So kind of going back to this idea of personal and economic freedom, I think you can't segment them. You can't, it's not binary. It's together, it's freedom. Because you might be able to say what you want to say and how you want to say it. You still might be able to vote for the leaders you want to vote for. But if 60% of what you earn goes to the government every single year, you are not free.
The next question will start with Mr. Kirk. The question is, many have argued that the welfare state has a negative human effect by disincentivizing marriage, family, and strong work ethic. So does the welfare state undermine Catholic social thought values?
It's a great question. I'd say absolutely. And we have the data and the evidence to show that. There's a great book written by one of my favorite thinkers of today, by Jason Riley, African-American conservative. He says, stop helping us. And he's literally, and his argument that he makes is that through the creation of the welfare state in America, we've seen these communities get worse. Just look at one particular number that is just, it's dramatic. Single motherhood in the black community in the 1960s was 21%. Now it's 77%. 77%. Well, what happened over the last 60 years? Did America become a more racist country? No, we actually became significantly less racist. What happened? If you're with a straight face going to say that America is somehow more racist today than in the Jim Crow South of the 1960s, I got some people in the antebellum South to introduce you to, because that is just adverse to reality. We are a significantly less racist country today than we were in the 1960s. We elected a black president, had a black attorney general, more black members in Congress have ever had. We have more respect for people of color than any other time in human history. This idea that America has not gotten less racist. We still have racists in our country, without a doubt, but we've gotten significantly less racist. So the point that somehow single black motherhood is attributable to institutional racism is not correct. You know what you can point to? The creation of the Great Society by Lyndon Baines Johnson in the 1960s, where we literally incentivized bad behavior. And Thomas Sowell says it best, an African-American economist from the University of Chicago, where we tell people in urban communities, not tell them, through government incentives, if you have a child, we'll support you, but if you get married, you stop getting your check. That's, if you reward bad behavior, you're going to get more of that bad behavior. And the results speak for themselves. The two communities in America, per capita, that receive the most government assistance is the African-American community and the Native American community. The two communities that have the most poverty, the most suffering, the highest drug use, and the most likelihood to go to prison are the African-American community and the Native American community. There is a direct correlation between the size and involvement of government into these communities and it's impenetrable capacity for them not to be able to break out of that poverty. Now, also part of it is failure of government schools, which I'm a huge critic of. That's why we need a national school choice bill to allow parents to be able to determine where their kids go to school, so they're not locked in these schools run by teacher unions that are not properly incentivized to have the best possible teachers there. So I will say our schools are very attributable to that. But finally, to tie the whole point together, the best way to help certain communities, the best way is through charity and is through economic empowerment and entrepreneurship. We have spent $1 trillion on the welfare state to try to make people's lives better that are poor in America, specifically African American communities and Native American communities. They are poorer per capita, per individual today than they were in the 1960s, yet us spending $1 trillion on trying to make their lives better. The best way is to open up markets, improve our schools, and have entrepreneurs go in those communities, and that's when you'll start to see people's lives get significantly better, not just continually have trillions of dollars to go after what might be a righteous goal, but ends up keeping these communities perpetually poor, filled with crime, and hopeless. That's not the society that we should strive for. So, thank you.
It's hard to hold. All right, I actually prepared this, and I want to make sure I get it right, so I'm going to read. A welfare system is designed to be a safety net for people who are not able, for a variety of reasons, to function independently in the economy. The majority of time, those reasons are not of their own choosing. Things like disability, family responsibilities, lack of employment opportunities, lack of access to relevant educational opportunities, lack of public transportation, and general health factors have all been shown to contribute to a person's need for a safety net or healthy welfare system. So at its core, a welfare system is designed to do exactly what CST calls for, care for the least among us. That is its intent. In relation to a negative human effect, all systems set up can be abused to the contrary of their original intent and create some unintended consequences, and these should be corrected whenever possible. However, in the case of a capitalist system, it has been proven that financial pressures on all families, not just families in the welfare system, are a leading cause of stress on a family and a cause of divorce. In a system where there's no safety net, and worse, the very real possibility of financial ruin, being only a broken car or broken bone away, marriages, even the best of marriages, can be pushed to the brink. Capitalist systems that force overtime, underpay workers for the value they bring to an organization, or force people to choose between family responsibilities or personal health and maintaining a job, all have a devastating negative human effect on marriage and family. To that extent, those businesses that don't recognize or honor the value of the family are contrary to CST. Now, marriage is understood by the Catholic Church as a lifelong commitment based on a vocation to love one another. The Church would not encourage anyone to be incentivized to be married if they do not have the vocation as their primary motive. In today's economy, many people are living together without being married purely for financial reasons and without the benefit of shared vocational commitment. This extends far beyond the welfare system into the traditional economy. Also, contrary to the image of disincentivizing work, many people are being denied their basic human dignity by having to work 2 or 3 jobs in an economy that refuses to pay a living wage. So there are people, for example, 55% of people who receive 10 work. So my question is, when an employee at Walmart, whose owners are all worth $10 billion each, are collecting food stamps, and then renewing them at Walmart, why am I subsidizing Walmart? Pay your workers a living wage. Thank you.
Thank you. The third question has to do with being at Creighton University, a Jesuit institution. As a Jesuit institution, we strive to promote justice. How do you define economic justice? And what should institutions look like to promote justice? And how is this different than charity? Dr. Kelly, you go first.
Thank you. The distinction between charity and justice is very important. Charity, in my mind, is meeting the immediate needs of a person. It's seeing a need and it's addressing it. Justice is getting at the root of why that person has the need. It's very different than charity. And so you're changing a whole system as opposed to simply giving someone a handout. Let me give you an example. 30 years ago, people were upset with the way in which the middlemen in the system of lots of goods and services from the developing world were sending goods and products up here and making a huge profit margin, so they started the fair trade movement. And what does the fair trade movement do? It basically says, if I want to spend a little bit more money, I can make sure that more of that money is left with the people who produce these products. Okay? And it essentially incentivizes them to produce, and it puts money back into the community in kind of a neat way. Fair trade has done so much good. I take groups down to Latin America all the time. We visit fair trade farms. It's incredible how much that incentivizes. So that's the idea of, instead of sending food or aid to farmers, we actually just give them an incentive through this system that changes the entire thing. Now, farmers in Latin America would be much better without the subsidies we have in our country, right? Because we can keep our prices high. We essentially undercut farmers elsewhere. And that's an example of what I would call corporate charity, right? Much of the money that we give in the form of welfare goes to companies, not to individuals. And oftentimes we overlook the fact that there are whole industries supported by government, and I'm talking about billions of dollars a year, and they take up a much larger share of quote-unquote welfare than individuals. Another example would be this economy of community that Pope Francis is pushing. And essentially, so basically, insofar as an institution can hit the principles I talked about, or the majority of them, that's what economic justice would look like. Do you ensure human dignity? Do you help secure the common good? Do you do the positive things that I mentioned all the way through? Are you in solidarity? When those conditions are met, that's how I would define economic justice.
The definition we have to be very careful with, because as soon as you start to get into this idea of economic justice, you start to put yourself in a position of someone did not earn this rightfully, or they did not deserve to have this sort of profit from what they did. That's why we do have the rule of law. We do have the rule of law that in a free market, those of us that believe in capitalism, that you should be able to sell what you want to sell, buy what you want to buy, as long as you're not harming someone else. So I'm glad you brought up the Walmart example. I'm actually not a huge apologist of Walmart. There's a lot they do wrong. Most of the grocery sales that they have are through food stamps. But there's a lot they do right. They bring down prices for consumers. They employ millions of people. They have expanded economic opportunity for people throughout their entire workforce. The average Walmart worker will only stay at that minimum wage entry-level position at 6 weeks, and they will work their way up through the position of the company. And the question that is always needs to be asked is, if these companies are doing such a horrible job and exploiting their workers so terribly, then those workers should just quit and find other work, because other people will find them. If you want to deliver value in the marketplace, do so. No, you laugh. You laugh. That's exactly how wages increased in the West throughout the last 100 years. Is they either voluntarily unionize, which I'm a very big proponent of. If you want to voluntarily unionize through a free market, more power to you. Or start your own business. You know, the best businesses that were started in America were started from workers that rebelled against their current employers, had an idea, risked everything, and dramatically improved the standard of living for everyone in this room. Whether it be Google, Apple, Facebook, all the companies that I guarantee people in this room are benefiting from. It's also important to note that we capitalists, we don't only believe that you should be able to keep the fruits of your labor and keep your profits, but you also have to hold responsibility for the losses. And this is something I actually think we'll find a lot of agreement in. Government should not be picking and choosing winners. Government should not be bailing out corporate interests. I'm very, very disciplined on this. I'm very principled. The fossil fuel industry should not be getting $36 billion a year in tax breaks. Same should be for the solar industry. I'm a capitalist. I'm not a cronyist. I'm not a corporatist. So when certain industries use the power and levers of government, they lobby for their own self-interest. That's anything but a free market. They're using the state to benefit themselves. And you can go through level and level of certain corporate interests that do that. But it's really interesting. If you look at the actual volatility of the most valuable companies, it's quite dramatic. The most valuable, successful companies in America today that we look up to, some of them didn't even exist 20 years ago. You look, Amazon right now is the big one that everyone's talking about, and they're using a lot of government subsidies and a lot of government contracts to subsidize what they do. They do some good and some bad. But Amazon was just a small fledgling company in the early 2000s that people didn't even think could possibly exist. The point being, in a free market, that sort of competitive undercurrent is so important. So when you use words like economic justice, the best way to take down a monopoly like Amazon, the best way to try to undercut a bad actor is not to have government to the Federal Trade Commission open an investigation. It's let's empower the next 1,000 entrepreneurs so that they can do that even better, so that they can compete against them. A great example is Walmart. I'm glad you brought it up. This is an example of how government prevented a free market correction against Walmart. Dollar General was trying to merge with Dollar Tree or whatever the dollar competitive market, where literally their whole model was we're only going to charge consumers $1. Like, wow, how terrible, right? We're only going to charge people $1. Walmart used all the power that they had in Washington, D.C. through the Department of Justice to block this merger from happening. Why? Because that would have been a huge competitor in that Walmart low-price market. So that's an example of how the free market was actually trying to bring down prices for everyone in this room. They were trying to make things cost less, be more accessible, and employ more people. What's the point I'm making here? Is that instead of trying to use the levers and unilateral authority of government to try to redistribute what you deserve, what you think should be right, allow the creative capacity of a free society to create something better, cheaper, and more widespread to go after what you consider to be a bad actor, not try to have a government bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. do that. Thank you.
Last question, and this is for Mr. Kirk. He chose this one. How would Turning Point, or how would you explain structural privilege, and is your organization aligned with Jesuit understanding that one should not profit from merely having positions of privilege?
So I will have to admit, I'm not as well versed on the Catholic social teaching of what the actual specific stance on privilege is, but I will kind of talk more generally in privilege, if that's okay, and kind of talk about what we talk about in general is this. And I will kind of use some biblical examples. What some people would call privilege, I would first call blessing. Okay, I would say that you should say thanks that you're born in a certain capacity or given certain gifts. And that's very biblical, by the way. Very biblical. God gave David the gift of leadership. He gave Esther, the gift of good favor. He gave Solomon wisdom. God bestowed certain individuals gifts and capacities to advance his kingdom all throughout the Bible. And so the idea of privilege is one I think that's very, very dangerous, especially, and I'm quite a harsh critic of this, I've gotten some pushback, especially when you start to get this idea of racial privilege, that you're somehow more privileged based on your skin color. That is a horribly racist idea, first and foremost. It is a racist idea to say that people are more privileged just because they're white. It is. Or that they're more, or they're not as privileged because they're a certain color. Because at that if you look at the fundamental definition of what racism is, the Webster Dictionary definition, racism is saying a certain group based on their skin color we're prejudiced against that certain group, whether good or bad. And so you know what? I think what it does is it further divides us racially and societally when someone says, oh, you're privileged because you're white. Well, let's look at the facts on that. There's twice as many white people than black people living in poverty in this country. Yes, as a percentage, more black people live in poverty. But you know what else it does? Is it delegitimizes people that make good choices. It doesn't properly address what has made America such a unique idea, which is that if you make good choices, you're going to succeed in America despite your skin color, despite your background. And here's what I always get. People say, Charlie, you can't possibly say the things you say because you're a white, cisgender Christian male. You say you think that? Okay, I think that. What I say is not any more or less true if I'm a white person or a black person or if I'm Latino. Truth transcends color. So this idea that certain individuals are more privileged just based on their skin color, this is the idea of white privilege, I find to be horribly racist and very divisive. The final thing I'll say is this, is that certain individuals would consider Jewish people to be white, to be privileged. And I find that to be incomprehensible if someone wants to make the argument that Jewish people had a privileged 20th century. Seriously. That somehow Jewish people were privileged over the last 100 years. So we can micro-select certain groups, but that dehumanizes what we as a culture really believe in, which I believe on the 50th horrible anniversary of Martin Luther King, I'll end with this, of his horrible death, he said, "I dream of a day where people will be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin." And so when you begin to get into racial privilege, you are then using a racist idea, and you are dehumanizing what people might have as good choices or bad choices of culture in a society. It is one of the most dangerous, cancerous ideas that has infiltrated higher education. And as you can tell, I have quite an opinion on it. So thank you.
So I think I want to focus on the structural part of that question rather than the privilege. Because I think it's really important to not miss this. So far what I've heard is that if you just let markets and charity take care of social problems, they will. Between 1800 and 1860, half of the exports from the United States were cotton. Who farmed that? Slaves. Slaves farmed that cotton. It was in the interest of the market to have no labor costs. The market kept slaves slaves. And if I had wanted to give charity to a slave, it wouldn't have made a difference. I could invite them over to my house, treat them really well, but they couldn't go to the schools I go to, or work at the work I went to, or have the rights I had. That's a structure. See, sometimes we can't change things unless we change the structures that structure society. It can't be individual. What if 500 million of that charity was given to the arts? That's not helping poor people. That's helping the Holland Center, which I like. I go there. But that's not, so this charity could go anywhere. And there's plenty of charitable giving out of Europe, by the way. We've been the beneficiaries of some grants from very wealthy families in Belgium who pay 50% taxes and still give. So I would question this idea that markets and charity will resolve everything, when in fact, I don't really have to worry about, wealth. 90% of the national wealth is held by white families. I don't have to worry about someone turning me away for employment because of my color. I don't have to worry about getting rejected, or I don't have to worry about getting sentenced at a rate much higher than somebody else because I'm white. I don't have to worry about any of that, and that's what I call white privilege. And he's right, it's a blessing. And I want to extend it to everybody. I want everyone to have the same privilege I have.
I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but one thing I will say is this, is if you do want to get into the privilege selection process, it is Asian Americans that are the most privileged in America. They by far the richest per capita group by race in America, by far, least likely to commit crimes. They live in the wealthiest neighborhoods. And by the way, if you want to go through the whole process of how they came to America, we put Asian Americans in internment camps in the 1940s. They were one of the most stigmatized, most racially ostracized groups in American history. And throughout the process of the last 80 years, they made good choices. They graduated from high school in record numbers, went to college, and now they are the richest group per race in America by far. Now, why is that? The U.S. Constitution was not written in Korean. There's not structural privilege trying to help people from Thailand. It's because they made good choices, and America is a place that rewards good choices.
It's been a vibrant discussion so far. We've got about 25 minutes left. We're going to go to about 10 till, so that we started about an hour and a little bit over. So this is where the line starts. I'm the mic keeper, and we're not here to hear your quantifications or your soapbox speech. We're here to hear questions from you, if you'd like. Please gotcha questions that will help this discussion go forward. So anyone who's interested, you're welcome to come forward and ask a question. Either of us. We're here.
Miller in the theology department here at Creighton. So I wanted to see how you reconcile, so we began this event, Turning Point, paying tribute to those who served in our military. Congressman Bacon was Brigadier General in the Air Force, but we still trash the government, whether mandatory and discretionary spending. Military is, or at least in discretionary spending, half of our spending goes to the Pentagon. That's one issue.
It's about points.
No,
You can ask the congressman. It's fine.
I just looked it up.
Yeah.
Didn't know this was a town hall.
The other thing is Forbes magazine, not necessarily the most liberal magazine in the world, has shown that they did a study that the country in the world with the most entrepreneurs per capita was Sweden. And why is that the case? Well, because they have universal health care. You don't graduate from college hoping you can get on health care. Second, they don't graduate from college with lots of debt. So they have the freedom not to be bound by huge healthcare costs and academic debt, and so that they can use their creativity. Entrepreneurship would be further in time. So how do we reconcile all these?
Okay. So thank you for the question, for being here. I appreciate it. So quick on Sweden. It's interesting you bring that up. Actually, by the World Economic Freedom Index, they're ranked above the United States. They have a higher level of world economic freedom. Sweden also has universal school choice, which I'm sure you totally support, right? Total school choice. They also fund their government primarily through fossil fuels, which I know the left, they love fossil fuels. Their government is funded by fossil fuels. Interesting.
Funded by fossil fuels.
They don't. They are. They're on the northern.
Off the rails.
Anyway, let me finish my point. By the way, how much does Sweden spend on their national military? I'm paying for this microphone, sir. So thank you. Sweden does not spend any money on a national military, so it must be nice to have U.S. completely subsidize the entire U.S. I'll recap. High level of economic freedom, so we should strive to have a higher level than they do, but they're higher with regulation, with capacity to start up a business. They're ranked higher by the World Economic Freedom Index. Full school choice. And the other part of it, which is really interesting, which I don't necessarily agree with, but they're a very, very homogeneous society with very low levels of immigration and no structural poverty in their country. So they have had the capacity and the blessing, I guess you could say, to spend a lot of money on social welfare programs. For better or for worse, but you make some good points there. We in this country don't have that luxury or that advantage. We've taken half of the world's immigrants every single year. That's a very, very good thing. Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, they have changed in recent years. It used to be one of the hardest countries in the world to immigrate to. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. So holding up the Scandinavian states as an ideal, there's some things they get very right, such as the world economic freedom, school choice, and their affinity for natural gas exploration in northern parts of their country. What they get wrong is, I think, some of the social welfare programs that I think limit personal capacity and high taxes for the highest earners, which I completely disagree with. So that's my response to your point.
Yes, but I just indicated to you that they have more personal freedom precisely because of the socialistic state.
Okay,
That's
so
precisely what I showed
I'm going to repeat what he said because not everyone heard it. You said they have more
I have a
personal.
microphone, I think everybody heard.
If they provided a microphone, then I would love to have you have a microphone. So I'll repeat what you said. They had more personal freedom because they didn't have to worry about finding health care.
Your argument has been here about entrepreneurship.
That's
the
an important
fundamental thing. We present from the massive amounts of money that goes to our government, the Pentagon. So we don't even talk about that. We talk about entrepreneurship. And I've taken you not on Catholic social teaching, but simply on your own factors, your own key arguments.
Correct. So
Now,
they're more
entrepreneurship,
economically free
Forbes
than we are.
magazine, your type of magazine.
I said they're more economically free than we are, which we should strive to get. We should
And
go
the
for it.
way you get there is through
Deregulation.
That's not what they get there. That's not how they get there. They get there because they provide people universal health care. They provide free education. That's how they get there. It's a democratic social state. Pope Benedict, want to go to Catholic social teaching, Pope Benedict says that democratic socialism is the closest thing to Catholic social teaching. So I took you on your own terms, and your argument is...
Okay, so let me recap. Being more economically free from the U.S. is partly democratic socialism. Embracing school choice is something that the Democrat socialists here domestically do not want at all. But I will concede the point that yes, they are more economically free. We should deregulate our economy. We should cut taxes more. Finally, you make the argument 60% taxes. That's the one thing I'll fundamentally disagree with. I will never want to live in a country where 60% of my earnings go to the government. That is not free thinking.
I just want to mention that there are other countries besides Sweden who deliver excellent education for free and excellent health care for free throughout Europe. And I think that what you just said is really important because you said, I would never choose to live in a country with 60% taxes. That's why if you choose to live in a country where you have 60% taxes, you can't call it coercion. Because no one is making you live there. You can move if you want. When I elect a government, even if they don't do what I want and I stay here, I'm not being coerced. I'm just saying, well, I hope it changes in 4 years. If I'm voting for somebody and they change things and I stay there, it's not coercion. I worry about coercion because dictatorships coerce and communist states coerce, but democracies don't because we vote and sometimes I lose. And if I choose to stay here, well, okay. On the military, I just want to quote a paper that you actually published in, the Washington Times. It says, a staggering report by the Defense Department's Inspector General last summer found that the Army made $2.8 trillion worth of wrongful adjustments to accounting entries in 1 quarter alone in 2015, and $6.5 trillion for the year. The Army lacked receipts and invoices to support those numbers or simply made them up. I am all for supporting our troops. What I don't like is that the military is a completely untouchable, being able to critique them.
New rule, 20-second question, 1 point, 1 minute response.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly and Mr. Kirk, for being here and having this conversation. I'm going to ask a question about UBI, and I actually would like Dr. Kelly to go first. Yeah, universal basic income. Sorry, I should specify. So my question for Dr. Kelly is, under what conditions need to be present or absent in order for us to have a robust universal basic income system here in the States? And my question for Mr. Kirk is, I'm assuming that it's probably something you're not for, but now let's assume that you're not. What would be your challenge as well?
So I'm not quite familiar with universal basic income, but I am familiar with the term the living wage, and I think it's probably something similar. What I would like to say is that I think that you ought to be able to work without going to college, 40 hours a week in this economy, and support yourself. And right now you can't. And I think that what we ought to be able to do is have a wage that is staked at the basic necessities, which are going to be different in different places. And if we apply it everywhere, then nobody loses out in the competition because all businesses are going to have to deal with it. And that way you don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs at QT or whatever else in order to be able to feed your children and make a living. And right now that's exactly what people are doing. And so a living wage, a just wage, has been a part of Catholic social teaching from the very beginning of it in 1891. Because I don't see it happening through charity, and I certainly don't see it happening through the market.
Just to say what the UBI is, it's a growing movement in America, predominantly out of Silicon Valley, that everyone has a right to a basic income. People are very surprised when I say this. I will gladly accept a UBI or a negative income tax if we abolish the entire welfare state. In exchange, instead of getting all these government programs and housing and Medicaid and Medicare, do what Milton Friedman argued for. Let's just give a check for the equivalent sum of $42,000 a year to every single recipient of government aid, and you can spend it whatever you want. I'll happily make that trade. You should introduce that in Congress, by the way. I don't think it'll go anywhere, but I think it's great. What am I really saying here? In exchange for this ridiculous welfare state, which I really want to, most of the money that we think is being spent on helping the least of these is not. It's going for paper pushers in Washington, D.C. that really don't do much to appropriate that money. So let's just be more efficient with it. Let's abolish the entire welfare state, get rid of housing and urban development, get rid of all Medicaid, all this, and say, all right, what's the sum total of that cost per year, and then you get a check. And you know what? You're responsible for it then. If you want to spend it on bad stuff, then you got to take that responsibility. If you want to spend it on good stuff, you have to take responsibility for that. It was something Milton Friedman argued for, and it has a lot of traction, which I think would lift more people out of poverty. Because then they said, well, maybe I may only have to spend $20,000 a year on food instead of what last year. Now I could do this, I could do that, and all of a sudden you empower people and have more freedom, not less. So I would say the inefficiencies embedded in our welfare state is mostly the part of sending it to Washington, and then like 10% of it ever comes back to where it's originally intended. And so that answer might actually surprise you. But one thing I will say is I do not believe in the idea that we should have UBI on top of all the other government benefits that we do provide. So thank you.
Hi, my question is for Mr. Kirk. I don't think I understand part of your argument quite. So you say that we are inherently not good. And you also say that we should allow private enterprise to run all charitable endeavors. Why would or should we trust private persons and enterprises who are inherently not good to care for the large population that is in need? Third question.
That's a very good question, very thoughtful. So it's quite simple. Human beings are always going to be self-interested. They're always going to be doing very, very bad things, lie, cheat, steal, and participate in envy. So the question is, what kind of society uses the worst inclinations of human behavior for the most amount of good for the most amount of people? And that is free enterprise. If you're a really bad person in the free enterprise system, and you're just a horrible, horrible person, it's very, very difficult to be widely successful in a market and be a horrible person. It's very, very difficult. You have to employ a bunch of people. You have to provide for their families. You have to build the buildings. You have to buy the products. You have to sell the goods and services. Even if you're a bitterly terrible, horrible, evil person in a market, if you're really, really self-interested, you have to create value. You have to employ tons and tons of people. The Waltons might be terrible people. They're worth, I think, $55 billion, actually. They're worth an insane sum of money. But they still employ 2.5 million people. They still brought down prices across America over the last 50 years. They still invested heavily in our infrastructure all across the country. So even if they're horribly wicked, broken people, which they may or may not be, I don't know, but they had to do something of value, and society benefited because of that. So the charity in particular, it's a very important point. I would trust the virtuous aims and goals of people that get involved in Catholic charity a lot more than the not-so-benevolent aims of goals of people that enter government. Because people that enter the Catholic charities, you really want to help the least of these. They're driven by a higher cause, a higher being, a social doctrine that I believe is quite virtuous and righteous. Government, the people that are working in the government, they couldn't care less. They just have this job. They're not there for the right reason. So that's the answer, is that you're always going to have imperfect people. So what kind of vehicle, what kind of system can you have to benefit the most amount of people? And that's a free enterprise system with a heavy focus on charity and people helping people.
So it hasn't been said explicitly, but what I'm hearing are tendencies to sort of associate good people with wealth and bad people with poverty. Or choices. Poor people make bad choices, while people make good choices. At least that's what I'm hearing. And I worry about that, because I think that a lot of times people make what they see to be the most rational choice in front of them. And we have different ranges of choices depending on where we're from and where we grew up. I also think, on a general level, that the vocation to serve in government can be a noble, Senator Bacon, Congressman Bacon, I think it can be a noble cause. I think people can go into government wanting to serve, and that a lot of people do that, and they really are good people. And they're not just simply bureaucrats
whether they're the FBI. I mean, there's a lot of people in government who risk their lives and their reputations to serve us. So I still think it's a noble profession. It can be a very good thing. So I'm a little worried about the general characterizations of these. I just wanted to say that.
I don't know if there was confusion. We're going until 10 till.
I understand why this has been a mainly American Western kind of discussion of economic policy, but I was wondering if you could both speak to the reasons, Mr. Kirk specifically, about how capitalism has left many in the third world behind and what role it plays in fixing that problem, and Dr. Kelly, how does economic justice come about through practical teaching in those countries?
Oh boy, so you want to comment on before? I'll talk really quick. I have to comment on what was said earlier because I want to clarify to make sure my point is made across. The incentive structure of people that are in private charity are trying to help those people improve their conditions as quickly as possible and move up in life, where the incentive structure in government sometimes is not always the case, is to keep them on that government program and keep renewing them, so on and so forth. That's the one thing I'll say. Kind of go back to what you said, the third world. Look, the statistics speak for themselves. As the markets opened in the third world over the last 100 years, you have seen an unbelievable improvement in the standard of living. I mean, it's inarguable, whether it be Vietnam or Thailand or Laos or Cambodia. Is there still structural poverty and horrible conditions? Absolutely. But look at a country like India. I mean, India is a great example. So, not to say India is this unbelievable shining city on a hill. There's 600 million people in India that don't have toilets. So I'm not going to say India is an unbelievable example, but you've seen a creation of a middle class in India, and that's because they've opened up the markets. They tried communism. They tried factionalization of government. And it's the fastest growing democracy in the world, and the biggest democracy. Thanks for your enterprise name.
Two things I would do to help with the developing world. First is to stop formulating trade agreements that hurt people. I got my first lecture on free trade from a campesino in the Dominican Republic who, after helping him farm for a morning, I said, wow, you're going to do really well at the market. He says, oh no, I'm not going to make anything. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, my market is flooded with subsidized goods from the United States. I can't sell this for anything. And I had no idea. Free trade is doing the second thing are free zones where we send down companies to Latin America and elsewhere, and we basically pay them the lowest possible wage, and they're tax-free. And so what happens is the countries that invite these companies don't get any taxes from the companies. They take them out of the wages of the workers, which are many.
Okay, so my question is, my grandparents are immigrants and they came here in order to pursue the American dream. How would you define the American dream, and how does that fit in with Catholic social teaching?
It can be either one. Probably with Dr. Kelly first.
Okay.
I would probably call the American dream that the opportunity to come here and to make a life. And you know, my family came over from Ireland 3 generations ago. There was no checkpoint. There was nothing. You know, we just came because we were desperate. And I think that one of the saddest things to me, every year I take a group of faculty and administrators from Jesuit universities all over the country to the southern border. And I see these people who desperately want to enter into our country. We know that immigrant-started businesses succeed at a much higher rate than native businesses. We know all of the benefits that come from immigration, and yet we still have this language and this rhetoric that is based on fear against them. I mean, some of the most beautiful people, I mean, we are a nation of immigrants. And I wish we could lose that fear language. And restoring the American dream is going to start, in my opinion, with that.
I am going to have to comment on immigration now, so thank you. Your great-grandparents, I would assume, came here legally on the laws that were on the books, right? They came over and they weren't breaking the current federal law. Here's the big problem, is that there is a huge problem with illegal immigration in this country. Basic estimates show that U.S. taxpayers subsidize illegal immigrants of upwards of $115 billion a year. 98% of all the heroin in this country comes across the southern border. That's a byproduct of an open, porous border. A study in Arizona showed that an illegal immigrant is twice as likely to commit a crime than a domestically born U.S. citizen. That's just a fact. There's 45,000 illegal immigrants in our federal prisons. Cite the study? The Arizona Department of Corrections. That's my study. Thank you.
No outcries.
Thank you.
No outcries. Thank you, or you'll be asked to leave. Thank you.
Woo! That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Please, please, yes, you, please leave. Thank you. No, for yelling out. But that was before
We're good.
we made this undertaking.
Thank you. So there's 45,000 illegal aliens in our prisons. These are just facts, and this is a byproduct of open borders. Now, I'm a huge proponent of legal immigration. Huge. I think we need more legal immigrants. In fact, I think we should open up the illegal immigrants to another 15 million people a year. But the idea that illegal immigration is something that we should just have more of, I completely and totally reject, and that's why we should build the wall. Thank you.
So, since this is a Catholic Jesuit university, from a Catholic perspective, should organizations receive tax dollars, such as Planned Parenthood, and should those, since those tax dollars, hold on, I have some help.
Should organizations such as Planned Parenthood, which perform abortions, see the beneficiaries of Title X funding, among other things, even if that money is not directly used to perform abortions? According to a Catholic worldview. Good question. Good question.
Yeah, I don't think that abortion should be paid for by federal money, and my understanding was at the Hyde Amendment that it wasn't. Second, though, when we say from a Catholic social perspective, we also need to argue that maybe that money shouldn't also create atomic bombs, which, when dropped, kill innocent people.
Quick answer. The fact that Planned Parenthood receives $500 million a year of U.S. taxpayer money is immoral and incomprehensible to me. Thank you.
Thank you both. You're very intellectual and very have both passion and heart, Christian heart. My comment to the professor, Romans 13, 1 through 7, definitely there's a calling for all men and women to serve in our United States government or any government around the world to restore social order and protection for the citizens. I disagree with you. I've done mission work in Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, South America, Nicaragua in particular. Marxist governments are not the way to go. I have gone down into the city dump in Managua, Nicaragua, time and time again, and brought busloads of kids who live there to the feeding centers where Protestant and Catholic clergy will feed them. Marxist government is not the way to go. It is bad. We have South Sudan Medical Mission going on right now, sponsored by our church. The government of North Sudan is oppressing the government of South Sudan and its people, moving them into Uganda. We have doctors from Omaha.
Is there a question here?
Both Catholic. I'm just stating fact.
Is there a question?
I'm stating fact. Is this a Jesuit university? Where's the hospitality? Well, that's that as the theology professor as well. That are protecting the people in the name of Jesus Christ. I didn't hear you mention Jesus Christ once. I didn't hear you quote Scripture once. You quoted the Catholic Church, the ideology that comes from men, not the Word of God, that stands for Jesus Christ, who is the living Word.
Nicaragua is a disaster because it's a Marxist government. El Salvador was a disaster because it was capitalist. So was Guatemala. So was Honduras. So obviously I made it very clear that the church rejects Marxist collectivism. I was extremely clear on that. I don't know what the issue is there. I completely support the missionaries in Nicaragua, and I hope they're successful.
Hi, thank you both for your time. My question focuses mainly on foreign investment. Tom touched on this a bit already. Do you think that it fits within Catholic social thought?
Guys, come on down.
Or, yeah, foreign investment within social capital thought. Your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take a quick one. The professor has much more experience internationally with this than I do, but at least from the observance of what I've read and I've studied and people I've talked to is that some more times than not, U.S. foreign aid has actually hurt some of the countries that it's intended to help than actually help them because of the corruption of the dictators that have used that foreign aid as leverage over certain local tribes or balkanization of their certain areas or regions. I think I find some agreement there, and that some of it was used through not so well-intended, let's just say, directives from the CIA over the last 50 or 60 years. What I will say is that there are some great programs that are happening internationally to try to foster entrepreneurship. The whole microloan movement, the whole bottom-up movement, which is trying to get really a belief in the individual that where are the next 100 million entrepreneurs globally and how do we find them? Because if you can find one effective entrepreneur, you can find 5 jobs. So if you find one entrepreneur, 100 million, you can find 500 million people that can have work. And that's taxes, and that's a school, and that's something really good that can happen. And that's really the main focus that I'm looking at globally is how do we find those next 100 million risk takers and creative people. And there's you go throughout Africa, you go to India, the ideas that these entrepreneurs are coming up with that are just, you would consider them these silly little businesses, whether it be being able to bike tourists across town and they have a whole business around it. That's really what I believe is one of the most special and magical blessings of the human condition is our capacity to think creatively and solve problems, and the market allows us to do that. So finding those next 100 million entrepreneurs over the next 10 years is something that's really going to better humanity. So thank you.
I think I would probably encourage a public and private partnership with foreign investment. One of the mistakes that we make, and it's interesting because having lived in Latin America, the Europeans do this so much better than we do. We give money directly to governments, and by the time it gets anywhere, most of it is gone in the pockets of whoever's there. Europeans do project-based aid, where they do really targeted things, and they have their people on the ground making sure that happens, and that's so much better. But secondly, with regards to companies, I would invest in companies that actually don't exploit, but try to still make a profit, but they can, it's not enough that Walmart lowers my prices. I want Walmart to treat their suppliers and the people that work for them in other countries better. That's what Walmart can do with its power as well, because it can actually improve the lives by paying more than the absolute bare minimum that it has to. Because how many billions do you need?
There's a class that comes in here in 10 minutes. So I'll try to have
Thank you for taking our questions in after time. My question is more for Dr. Kelly. So I took you for a class, and the whole time I wanted to ask this question, but I never felt like it was relevant. I didn't feel like it was relevant even after, but so I never asked it. But so when you have examples like Mao and Stalin, those are examples of government, going over. You have an example closer to you of Fujimori. He kind of got crazy and took over his power, and so those examples of big government don't really work. So what is your response to that? Because restricted economy generally goes along with the restricted government, and it's not exactly the best.
I'm not sure I understand your questions any better than you in my class, but I will try as much as I can. I think that, and so I'm going to show the Mao example. Up under Fujimori, a free market economy that limited political rights. And so that's why I'm loath to say that one is always with the other. We've got to be careful about saying only with economic freedom is there political freedom, because actually I've seen the opposite.
Okay, so my question is about generational poverty and generational wealth. And it's kind of centered around the idea of it's not what you know, it's who you know. Why is your argument the best for eliminating generational poverty?
So this will be our last kind of comment. So it's about opportunities. So economic freedom is a necessary precursor to opportunities. So how do you eliminate generational poverty? Is you have to fix our school system, which I think we could find some commonality and agreement in there. But also, I have a fierce belief in the individual. I think that there are so many risk takers and entrepreneurs and creative thinkers out there that, given the capacity to succeed in a marketplace, can do absolutely phenomenal things. So how do we empower them? Well, that's through a low tax, competitive regulatory environment where they can actually do that. So, but as far as generational poverty goes, there's one of the problems America has is with upward mobility. It's something that the studies will show that we actually have to address that a lot better. And I think instead of throwing rocks at the top of the building, fix the elevator. And the elevator is a working school system, a welfare state that does not incentivize bad behavior, and also a culture that will continue to try to create that next generation of risk takers and entrepreneurs. Thank you.
I think that it's much easier to succeed if you come from wealth, so wealthy children will succeed easier than poor children. And I think there have to be structural changes to make it possible for poor children to change that. I don't think it can happen just through individual initiative and the free play of the market.
Well, we just like to thank everyone so much for coming. A big special thank you to everyone that was respectful to both of our speakers. We really thank you. Here at Creighton, especially all across Nebraska, one of the biggest things that we need to do is keep the respectful, open, civil discourse and dialogue flowing. As demonstrated, we hope that we can continue to do more forums like this so that we can get two different perspectives, viewpoints, and hopefully take a little bit away that we didn't necessarily come here with. So with that, I will let you all leave. I know they said that we have to be out in about 7 minutes, so if we could just skedaddle real quick, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. We do ask that you leave the way that you came. And if you are a Turning Point USA member, will you please come down front really quick? Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.